Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. We are live and kicking it on episode 24. Justin, how you doing, brother?
I am fantastic, my man.
Fantastic. That's always a good adjective to use to describe your day.
You
Uh,
know, that's funny you said that. Because people sometimes take it. Can I say fantastic or I'm awesome or I'm living the dream? And people always look at me funny and think that I'm being sarcastic.
yeah,
But it's exactly the opposite. I used to do it when I was really, really big. I used to say I'm living the dream, but it was always sarcasm. But now I literally am living the dream, or I literally am. I'm fantastic. I'm sore, I'm run down, I'm tired, but there's no other way I would want to live than I am right
yeah, and I think that sometimes people get into this mindset, or almost like you're on autopilot when people ask those types of questions, like, "Hey, how you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing well. How are you?" And then that's just kind of like the quick exchange of dialogue. I don't remember where I read this from, and maybe somebody listening to the podcast was the person who kind of put it out there. But I remember on social media the other day, I read someone, I don't remember if it was a friend of mine or, somebody in my professional network, or maybe it was just like a random tweet or Instagram post that I stumbled upon that has nothing to do with anybody I know. But I read this post that said that this individual who was posting it said, I had this foreign exchange student from Brazil or somewhere, and I asked him what the strangest part about America or Americans was, and he said that the strangest part, or the strangest thing that he noticed, was how Americans ask him how he's doing, but they don't really care to hear the answer. And I thought that that was pretty funny because, like, we do that all the time. We say, "Hey, how are you?" or "How's it going?" or "What's up?" And then we don't really pay much mind to the answer because we kind of like then just flow into like a normal discussion, or you just say it in passing to people, like, "Hey, how are you?" and then you just carry on about your way.
now. That's kind of funny because I was thinking that exact thing earlier.
And so now
I
when I
was
ask people, like, I try to like be actually conscientious when I say that or when I ask that, and then I try to be genuine too with, like, if I say how are you, like, I want to actually know how you're doing, like, how are you doing today?
right, exactly.
So
I
it's
like
just,
that.
that's kind of interesting how we both kind of opened the intro today with that. So it's just you and I today, no guest. And that's definitely not because we're at a shortage for guests. That's certainly the opposite end of the spectrum here. We have a litany of guests that are all lined up. You and I talked earlier off air that we're going to get them scheduled. You and I have two convenient days for podcasting, at least for recording purposes. Generally, we do. I mean, we release them every Saturday, but you and I uh, typically also record every Saturday too. So we record and then we release shortly thereafter. And we're probably going to start to stockpile some because you have Wednesdays free as well. My schedule's ultimately a lot more flexible than yours is. So Wednesdays are open and Saturdays are open. So now it's just a question of me making sure that all these people are scheduled for time slots that work for them. And then we'll kind of go from there. So we have, again, a bunch of new interviews coming up. And it's really cool because I feel like, and everybody we have had on thus far kind of fits this too, but we have a lot of like polarity in our guests. Like one person, is a coach, and one person's an athlete, and the other person, has nothing to do with athletics. And it's just how we pull these people from random parts of life that all have messages and pretty good stories, and kind of still somehow we can work it away or work around to fit like the fitness theme of our podcast.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I think that's the whole idea with the success. My drive or my focus on wanting to always find somebody's success, because success can be tied to anything. You know what I mean? Being a successful businessman, you could take those tactics and become successful in the gym or in your life in a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned that before, and I think that
Yeah.
one person that's kind of sticks out specifically is Josh Morosi, who mentioned that, how the gym is kind of a microcosm or a metaphor for the bigger picture, which is life. And, you and I have discussed that previously too. And I think that fitness is really a good way to like measure success. Not that I'm saying the only way to be successful is to be physically fit too, but it kind of fits a bunch of different molds for people, because in fitness, there's both the measurable and the intangible data too. Like there's measurable goals that you can have with like fat loss, or, I want to win my show, or I want to run this time in my 5K or what have you. But there's also like the unmeasurable, like the intangible stuff. Um, like I
Right.
want to like self-improvement and self-confidence and all those other things that you can't really quantify. So I think that when you have discussions of success and what success look like, I think that the fitness realm is kind of an easy way, not necessarily an easy way, but a very clear way to depict that and make it a metaphor for people to understand.
Right.
So getting into fitness, speaking of which, well, let's backtrack a little bit. 2 weeks ago, we had on Jeff Widger, who was a football coach and a student athlete mentor. He's coached football virtually his entire adult life. He grew up involved in it. And he and I met actually through football. We coached in the same high school team. And he kind of started getting into fitness and would pick my brain really frequently for diet advice and training advice and lifestyle advice. And pretty soon it progressed to me working with his diet and nutrition, not necessarily as in like a coach and client realm, but more as in like a friend to friend, like, here, this is what you should be doing. And he would like check in with me all the time and made a lot of progress. Not that I'm saying that I had anything to do with his weight loss necessarily. I mean, that's all on him. But he kind of got started. He was like 280, and now he's down to, last we spoke to him on the podcast, he was 200 even. So he'd lost 80 pounds. And he had just recently finished that 75 hard program, which was Andy Frisella's program. So if you haven't listened to that episode, that was episode 22, I believe, correct? 2 weeks ago.
22. Yep.
So
Yep.
go check out episode 22 with Jeff Widger from 2 weeks ago. And you kind of, before we even got off air, you said, hey, I'm doing this. I'm going Monday and we're starting it. So now you're on
Savage.
day
Yep.
12 of it. Just to kind of
Absolutely.
do a quick recap for the listeners that are listening right now that didn't listen to Jeff's interview, just kind of give a synopsis on what the 75 hard program and capsules. And remember, I keep smacking myself every time I say this because Jeff corrected me, because I guess Andy's pretty adamant on it, that it's not a challenge. It's a program. Like you can't say the
Right.
75, because I just called it the 75 challenge, because that's kind of the buzzword in fitness, especially through social media, is what this challenge or that challenge. Okay, it's not a challenge, it's a program. So the 75 hard program, what
Yes.
are the, not necessarily the prerequisites, but what do you have to do in order to have your journey be considered part of the 75 hard? There's like rules essentially.
Yeah.
What are all the
So,
rules?
so basically, the quick and dirty of it is there's 5 aspects. You have to follow a diet. It doesn't have
Yep.
to be any specific particular diet, but you have to follow one.
Mhm.
And you need to be strict on it. So follow a diet. You have to drink a gallon of water every single day, which is easy for most of us. But and anybody who knows me, if I'll get on a sidetrack for a second, anybody who knows me knows that I carry a gallon around all the time,
Yep.
and I frequently fill it up. Twice in 12 days, I have woke up at 11 o'clock at night and had to drink about a quarter of a gallon because I wasn't sure if I had finished the full volume of a gallon or not. And I was like, not happening, So
Yep.
follow a diet, drink a gallon of water every day. And then you also have to have 2 45-minute workouts, one of which has to be outside no matter what. So rain, sleet, snow, sun, wind, lightning, doesn't matter. Has to be outside. And then one of them can be inside. Both of them can be outside if you want. You can, I listen to Andy's podcast, which we'll have to link it to this one.
Yep.
If somebody wants to try this. But I listened to his podcast and I liked how he talked about the outside workout. You could drive. If you can't go for a run, you can go for a walk, a jog, a hike. If you can't run, walk. Can't walk, crawl, that kind of thing. It doesn't matter. Just get outside and do whatever it is you're going to do. If you can't do anything else, drag your elliptical outside and do it in the rain.
Yeah.
That's the idea, is get outside and do something. So we got the diet, water, and then go outside or do your 2 workouts, 45 minutes apiece, one of which has to be outside.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to read a self-help, motivation, entrepreneurship book, 10 pages every day.
So
You can't
something
listen
that's
to.
some type of text that's going to be beneficial to you in some way.
Yeah. No, you can't read Harry Potter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you have to be something you're gonna learn from. So you have to read 10 pages every day, and then you have to take a progress picture every single day.
Got it.
Um, so the catch is that at any point in the challenge in the program, if you skip a step, anything at all, you you mess up on your diet, you have a cheat meal or a refeed, um, you forget your water, you forget your picture, or you go out with the boys, because this is the other part is you're not allowed to drink any alcohol for 75 days. So you go out for with your lady friend for the evening, and you have a glass of wine with dinner. You'll restart.
Yeah.
You restart from day one. So it's pretty savage. The program itself. Um, at first, when I first started explaining why I was doing it, I kept saying it was a fitness challenge, blah blah blah. But pretty quickly, I've learned that this has nothing to do with fitness at all. I mean, there's a fitness aspect to it, obviously, because you're doing two 45-minute long workouts every day. But to me, I'm learning more mental discipline and mental toughness from this. Like, I'm pretty sore right now. And I still have two workouts to do today. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
it's after 8 o'clock. So I'm gonna be up pretty late tonight. But it's just it's conditioning myself to have to get it in. You just have to do it.
I was listening to, and that kind of, we can kind of branch off with this a little bit. I was listening to Ben Pekulski, who people who know me closely know that I had, a professional relationship with Ben where, I did some article writing for him for his website and some content generation back when I was in college. It was a great learning experience for me to, to talk to him on a somewhat regular basis, just to kind of pick his brains on different things. And he actually prepped me for two of my bodybuilding competitions. So fantastic learning experience. But anyway, I digress. He was speaking in a podcast, and he talked about how he always got a lot of credit for how hard he worked. And people always talked about the self-discipline. And that was something that continuously brought up, like, oh, you're so disciplined, you're so hardworking, you're so driven. Like, and he was kind of dismissive over that. He said, like, yeah, obviously it takes hard work, clearly, but he said that it wasn't necessarily the hard work and the willpower. He said it wasn't just like I willed my way through these things. What I did was I established daily habits, and these habits became almost involuntary. Like, I eat at this time, I wake up at this time. And if you do these things enough, you're going to eventually then progress into making them involuntary and habitual by nature, where you just do them. Like, I think the analogy that I've used on the podcast prior was like, you wake up and you brush your teeth. Like, I personally don't think about like, oh, I have to brush my teeth this morning. It's just something that kind of happens organically and naturally, where I just do it as part of my daily routine. Um, and so like, that's something that I think that people have a lot of success with. Like, I have a decent track record with clients, doing small integration and implementation of healthy habits. Not like, here's a diet, here's a training program, have fun, go do it. Because especially if some people are coming from like a sedentary or non-fitness lifestyle and they're new to this whole thing, they're not going to be able to follow a diet 100% more than likely. So you need to integrate small steps like increasing water. And we've talked about that plenty of times before. And it seems like, to me, not being privy to the information as closely or as detailed as yourself, because you've listened to Andy's podcast and such, and you're kind of immersed in it a little bit more, a lot more, I should say, than I am. But it seems like that's what this program instills too, is habits, because it's not necessarily the diet you follow. You have to follow a diet, any diet.
Right.
So it's okay. It's not necessarily like the drinking alcohol. Like, is a glass of the one that you brought up, is a glass of wine during dinner with your wife going to sabotage things? No, absolutely not. If anything, it might actually be beneficial to you. But that's breaking the habit, and that's not sticking to the plan. And so when you bring up these things that you're doing every single day for 75 days, then it becomes habitual. And I remember speaking to Jeff shortly thereafter, you and I recorded the podcast with him, and he was telling me that, like, because he wanted to take a deload, both mentally and physically, because Jeff, he was in much better shape than he was when he started, but it's not like he was a world-class athlete when he started this too. But when he started this, he was, all gung-ho, and afterwards you still have that motivation, but he said that he just needed a little bit of a break. And when he went on this break, then he noticed that like he was going, I got the sense that he was going stir crazy from taking 3 days off. Because he said,
Right.
like, I don't know what to do with myself. I need to get back on the horse. So that just proves that the things that you do in this program do become habitual. So I think
Oh,
that that's an
absolutely.
important piece for everybody, not just in regards to the 75 hard, but if you're doing anything. And I think we spoke about this, several times when we first started doing this podcast, because one of the things that you mentioned was instrumental for you. And I think that everybody can attest to this who's gone on some kind of fitness journey is you need to be able to stick to something in order to accomplish specific goals. So if your goals are fitness, you need to have a nutrition plan that you're able to stick to, or you need to have workouts that you're able to stick to. And that's why I think Andy kind of does this program, is because you have no choice but to stick to it. And if you can't, then you're not ready to move on to the other programs that he has. So you have to start the 75 again, because I think Jeff mentioned, isn't this kind of a segue to other programs that he has?
Yes, it is, and this is terrible, but I cannot remember the name of it. But I think it's 0 to 100, something like that. I haven't even looked into it because because I like to do things like step by step.
Yeah.
So like I haven't even looked into the other stuff yet too much, other than what he said in in the podcast when I listened to the steps and how 75 hard works.
Hmm.
Um, but that's the next step, honestly. I'm gonna do the 75 hard and then check that box and go on to the next one, because the idea of getting gain from putting yourself through this kind of program is just too much, too attractive to me
Yeah.
to not see what the next one is.
Certainly. I mean, that's a product of being a goal-oriented person is, you never have, there's no end goal. That's the irony of a goal, is it's never achievable if you're truly after it.
Right.
Because even if I set a goal of winning a specific competition, um, that goal is achieved, but then the next goal of winning a bigger competition quickly steps in to take its place. So I don't think of it as different goals. I think of one continuous goal of like self-improvement or self-mastery or whatever.
Right. Well,
So
and
what
it's
is
and
your trading?
that's the
Go ahead.
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say that's kind of like the idea of why I say the before and during instead of
Uh-huh.
before and after,
Yep.
because I'm terrified of talking about afters or the end, or like actually achieving a goal, like the big picture, because then what do you have to shoot for?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah,
So go ahead.
I think about that all the time, actually. And I thought about that. For some reason, it's like vividly sticks out in my head, thinking this when I was really young. And I mean, by really young, I mean like high school age. I remember being in high school, and I don't know why this thought has always traveled with me. Um, but when I was in high school, I remember thinking to myself how strange it was that people didn't play sports. And it had nothing to do with sports, because like I understand that there's a lot of people that don't have any interest in sports, which is fine. And the reason I brought up the sports thing is because in my head, and I remember talking to a group of friends about this, I said, these are like some of the people that don't play sports, that's fine if you don't play sports, but some people have like grades to focus on. I'd like to consider myself a person who focused on sports and grades equally, as was like Liam Kearney, who was our guest last week on episode 23. So if you haven't listened to Liam's episode, go listen to episode 23, which is broken down into two parts. It's a really good interview with a fantastic young kid. Um,
Yeah, I'm excited to see where he goes, by the way,
for
in the
sure.
future.
But anyway, I could never understand how people could come to school every day and not be actively and vigorously working towards something. Like if I came to school, I obviously worked towards my grades, and then I had practice after school for whatever sports season was in at the time. and you're constantly working to do something or to improve on something. It's almost like it gives you a sense of purpose or life purpose. Now it sounds weird looking back in retrospect as adults to say like my life purpose was high school football at the time or whatever, but like that's kind of what it was, so now, and I would look at people that would like not get good grades. They wouldn't really have big friend groups or look for like social status as like something they were working towards. They didn't play any sports. They didn't really have much going on in their life. At least that was how I perceived it at surface value. Not that I'm trying to like undermine or disrespect any of them, but it just looked like there was a lot of kids that were just on autopilot. Like they were going to school, they weren't caring about their grades, they weren't playing any sports, they weren't active in any extracurriculars. And it's just like, I thought that would be like Groundhog Day, just like repetitively coming in a monotonous fashion to the school and then just going home. But it's like, what the heck does this person live for? Like, what are they doing? And that kind of stuck with me. And now I see that in adulthood where people are going through the monotony of everyday life and they're just kind of like stuck in this job that they don't want to work, or they're doing all these things that they don't want to do every single day. And it's like, hey, if you don't like it, change it. Because I have that discussion with people who are in education that complain about education, and trust me, like obviously it's definitely an emotionally and mentally a very stressful job at times. It's
Yeah.
emotionally taxing, but like I try not to complain about it too much because I genuinely love it. And I know people that all they do is complain about what they do as a teacher. And I'll say, listen, if you don't like it, don't do it. And then likewise, I'll have the opposite of that, where people say how great teaching is because you get to work with kids and you get summers off and, you get paid all summer, even though you don't work, and how wonderful it is. And I tell those people, listen, I'm absolutely not being dismissive over the fact that it's great because I absolutely love it. But if you think that this job is so wonderful, you know,
Go do it.
reformulate what you're doing, get a degree, and go teach. Like you can do this. Like, so that's why I try not to be envious of other people's situations, because if you're doing something and you're stuck in this rut that you don't want to do or that you don't want to be in, you have the power to get out of it. I have no idea what set me on this rant, but I don't even remember where I was in the first place when I started, but that's kind of my
I don't.
my
I
little
don't
spiel.
either. I don't either. I don't know where we were at the beginning, but I like it because that's like one of the first times that you went on a rant like that with me, where that's what I do. Like when I do these videos, I pop up on Instagram from time to time. That's where they come from. It's just like it's a deep down burning desire where I need to tell somebody. I don't know who it is, but I got to tell somebody they're worth it to go and do something.
Yeah.
And that felt like the same kind of thing here. I'm like, that's savage. I love it.
I don't want to use the term because I know that you have a love-hate relationship with this phrase, the motivation term, because you say that motivation can be fleeting and it can leave you and it can come and go. And I have that happen to me. Like I'll have these, not that I'm ever unmotivated necessarily, but I get in these weird spells where I'll be at my house and suddenly I just get this like overwhelming motivation to clean, and I just want to like clean my whole house. And it could be at the most obscure times. It could be 5 in the morning or 9 at night or, the middle of the day. And it just comes and goes. And sometimes I get like very, very hyper motivated. Again, not that I'm ever like lacking motivation to do what I need to do, but it's weird how it just kind of comes to me in spurts. It's like a hormonal, like adrenal like output where it just hits me all of a sudden. I got to go and I got to do something right now. Like I got to post something or I got to, try to improve in some regard. So I
Right.
definitely understand how you've said before that, motivation isn't necessarily a great term because motivation can come and go. And I think that kind of
So
works its way full circle to the habits argument about how you need to form
right,
habits because those will stick with you.
right. Yeah, that's kind of like what I was getting ready to say too. Is I've learned a little bit about motivation over the last 6, 7 months. Um, and I still have that love hate relationship with it. It's just because of the habits. If I relied solely on motivation to lose 200 pounds,
Mhm.
uh, I would have I'd still be 500 pounds because motivation it goes away, but it's an amazing kindling to get the fire rolling.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm starting to respect it more and more and more because if it's all sometimes it's all it takes is a little bit of a kindling. My story or your story or Liam's story when he started doing the missionary trips or Jeff's story. All these people's stories might be kindling for one person to get their fire started. So if they can be motivated to get that fire rolling, then maybe I don't hate motivation as much as I thought I did.
And I think that anytime you have a word or a term that can be as ambiguous as motivation, because it's something that uh, is very abstract in a sense that the definition is going to be so varied from person to person. So I
Right.
don't necessarily think that you're learning more about what motivation is. I think that you have this working definition that's slowly starting to change in your mind of what it is. So not necessarily that your relationship with that word is changing, but your definition of that word is changing.
Right.
Kind of an abstract way of thinking about it, but that's kind of how I envision it in my mind a little bit.
No, I like it.
So anyway, before I got off on that tangent and jumped up on the soapbox there, don't even remember what we were talking about and what kind of like preface that whole spiel. But let's go into the training a little bit now that you're on the 75 hard program. And I'm sure people are interested just because of like the quarantining aspect obviously is still going on. And we can say coronavirus and COVID-19 on our podcast because we don't have to worry about being demonetized because we have no financial gain off this podcast yet. But if you want to sponsor us, you can shoot us an email or hit us up on social media. Anyway, so what's your training like? You said that we have to do a 45-minute workout outside and a 45-minute workout that can be inside. So you have two 45-minute workouts and one has to be outside. You
That's
mentioned
right.
oftentimes you've been doing them both outside. How's your training progressed through this whole thing?
Yeah. So,
And I say, I got to interrupt you. I say whole thing and it's only been 12 days. So there's not like a
20.
whole lot of progression, I'm sure, that you've had in how your training is kind of adapted right now, but there will be
Right.
over time. So we'll kind of have to revisit this. But anyway, go ahead.
So it's been 12 days. That's 24 workouts. I can tell you the first week, I went out really, really, really hard.
Uh-huh.
I woke up for work on day one and I had to be at work at 5. So I got up at 2:30. I did my breakfast, got everything ready, and I went to work and I went for a run, which I haven't ran since my triathlon, really. Because didn't hurt my knee, but that orthopedic injury was flared up, and I've just been kind of trying to let it heal.
Hmm.
So I set out to walk. I got out of the truck, I turned my headphones on, started my watch, and I actually started Andy's podcast. Um, and I I walked to the end of the parking lot, which is like 200 or 300 feet, and next thing I know, I'm running. Because it's just kind of how I am. Um, and I got motivated, which whatever, we'll take it how it comes. But it felt great. So I ran for that workout, and then that night I did a a legit leg day in my basement, which I did a lot of box jumping and RDLs.
Yep.
I was doing huge volume because I don't have all the weight that we have at the gym, but I have enough. Um, and I don't have all the good equipment. You know what I mean? I don't have a solid squat rack. I don't have, leg press machines, all the machines, but I have enough weight to get it done. But being that we're quarantined, I'm not trying to squat with people around. I'm not without somebody to spot. So, um, I've been doing a lot of volume training.
Uh-huh.
Um, like sets of 15, 8 to 10 sets of 10 to 15 with a moderate to high weight, not super high, but a moderate weight. Basically just things to get the heart rate rolling and get a sweat pumping.
And I
That's
think
what
that
I've
that's
been doing.
probably going to be beneficial to you for a lot of reasons. I had a I don't want to say a discussion because it wasn't necessarily dialogue, but my coach, Austin Stout, who we've plugged several times on here, and actually said that he'd like to be a guest in the near future. So he's one of those aforementioned people that we need to get scheduled in. He said he does several Q&As. He does his own weekly question and answer session where he puts it on social media and people respond and he answers them in video form. And then he has a bunch of Q&As for his podcast. Well, I asked a question, but I think last week or something, asking for his opinion on keeping your central nervous system like pretty well sensitized and upregulated during your time off of heavy weight training. So I asked him if he thought that, because a lot of the strength, I mean, for our listeners that don't understand this or know this, a lot of your strength progression, both upwards and downwards, is really heavily predicated on your central nervous system. So when you take a week or 2 or 3 weeks off from the gym and you lose strength, it's not necessarily that you lost muscle tissue. Like your muscle tissue isn't just going to fall off like some people think. A lot of it is just central nervous system downregulation, where your nervous system can't handle the weights and isn't kind of sensitized to feel them and handle them as readily as you normally would. So you feel a little bit off, where like on a squat, for example, you just unrack it and it just feels heavy on your back and you know that it's heavy. You didn't lose muscle in your legs over the past 3 weeks of not training or what have you. You know, that's just kind of where it lies. So I asked Austin on his Q&A if he thought there would be benefits to doing explosive work, like plyometrics, a lot of single leg box jumping, definitely speed work, like sprinting, like we're actually talking like full high intensity sprints, like 100 meters, 40 meters, 50 meters, whatever, to kind of keep your body and your central nervous system sensitized during your time away from the gym. So that way, when you get to the gym, your body's a little bit more primed and in tune and ready to go to handle the weights again. And I asked him this. It definitely wasn't rhetorical because I wanted his opinion, but I had my opinion on it, which my opinion on it was that I thought it would be a good thing to do that. And
Right.
interestingly enough, he kind of had a counter argument, and he said that he would not do that. Not that it's going to hurt you. He said it definitely has its place, but he said that you're in that, for lack of a better term, combat mode all the time. Like your nervous system is always firing when you're strength training or when you're a bodybuilder, like a powerlifter, strongman, anything where a large majority of your training is in the weight room, working with heavy weights. And he says it's always upregulated. He said this can be a time for you to actually focus on more volume work or longer time under tension and actually get away and allow your central nervous system to kind of almost like a deload, essentially.
Right.
And so that's kind of, I feel like that's kind of what you're doing here, is giving your body a break from the heavy weights, because you mentioned you have some orthopedic issues. Now, whether that's caused by the weights or just correlated with heavy weight training, it's something that you've had to work through. So, this is kind of a time to unwind in a sense. Not that your training gets any less intense, but you're just not working with the heavier weights, but you still, I mean, I've seen some of your videos, you're still using heavy enough weights to where you're still probably gaining some strength, I'm sure.
Oh, I've actually that's the crazy thing is I actually do feel like I'm getting stronger and with the less equipment, and I'm enjoying the gains, for the gym terminology there. From this, lifting in the garage gym or at the fire station, where we don't have huge amounts of stuff, but we're just, making it work.
Yeah. Well, the measurables too are so much greater when you use basic equipment. So let's take a barbell, for example, and let's take 3 primary lifts with that. You could do a bench press, you could do a squat, you could do a deadlift. We'll just use those 3 because those 3 are pretty popular examples and something that most of our listeners are probably familiar with. When you progress up in those lifts, over time, you can accumulate a lot of weight pretty quickly. Like you could add, 10 pounds on any given week. Not that I'm saying you're going to consistently get in 10 pounds every week, but if you train, for like, let's say you plan out like an 8-week training cycle to increase your bench. In that 8 weeks, given the right type of programming, I mean, depending on what level you're at, obviously, if you're, a very, very high elite level power lifter, you're not going to be able to put on a ton of weight because you're already at almost maximum capacity. But if you're like an average guy in an 8-week training cycle, you could easily put 25, 30, 40 pounds on your bench.
Right.
And when you're focusing on those types of heavy barbell compound movements, it's easy to, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's more noticeable when you progress. Whereas let's say you do a dumbbell curl, your bicep is a very small muscle group that you're trying to isolate, and you can't continue to add a ton of strength to your biceps. I mean, you can go your whole training life and never curl over 50 pounds. It
Right.
stays within a very small range of what's possible for that tiny muscle group when it's in an isolated movement. So that's kind of the exciting thing about training with less equipment, at least for me, is when I train with less equipment, I see a lot of strength progress. And obviously there's a correlation with muscle hypertrophy when you have strength go up, but it also makes training more fun. Like for a while during wrestling season, when I was coaching, I was just training at our athletic complex at the school. So we have all free weights. I mean, we have some glute hams, we have rows and rows of power racks, and we have dumbbells. So I'm working with barbell movements, dumbbell movements, and body weight exercises. So like pull-ups, dips, and that sort of thing. And it was cool because I was just coming off of a show. So I was actually in my weakest, like most depleted state once wrestling season began. And I ended up not only having that going for me as far as strength progression, because when you're super depleted coming out of a contest prep, you can walk up and down the road and add strength to your legs just because you were so crushed for so long. And then on top of it, I was just training at the facility where I only had free weights. So I was focusing on barbell movements, dumbbell movements, and body weight exercises, like I said. So I was training so heavy and forced to use compound exercises and not kind of target muscle groups in isolation. I kind of followed like a modified DC split. And it was great going into the gym because I was making progress every week. That was what was awesome. I wasn't looking as good because I was still depleted from my contest prep as far as size goes. So I was still like, my body weight was still low, but I wasn't shredded anymore because I was starting to accumulate body fat back. So it was like, I'm less lean than I was in contest prep, but I'm smaller than I was in the off season. So it was kind of like this weird in limbo type of like body that I wasn't very happy with. But again, I was making progress in the gym. So I'm like, ooh, this is fun. Like I want to keep going to the gym because I'm getting stronger. So heck, I'll stay with this.
Right.
So
And
I think
I've
focusing
actually,
on the basics helps in that regard.
yeah, absolutely. So I've actually taken some stuff away from like our training together when we were training beforehand,
Uh-huh.
before all this happened.
Back when we were
Like,
allowed to be around each other.
right. Um, One thing that you said to me early on when we first started working together was you can get stronger by a rep or a pound, but make sure you do better, especially when you're, like you said, novice or new, when you can make them gains on a week to week or month to month basis. I still am hammering with that like as much as I possibly can. Like on my back day yesterday, I hit 315 for 8.
Uh-huh.
Um, Previously, I went back through both my workout books. I don't think I hit 315 for more than 6 ever. Um, no, that's not my heavy because last week I hit 365 for 2, but I did 315 yesterday for 8. Like, and that was unbelted without wraps
Uh-huh.
because I don't have a belt. I don't have a belt at my house, and I don't have the straps at my house either. So my grip strength is obviously getting better, and my endurance is getting better, which is pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, I bet. When you don't have those
So,
resources too, you're kind of forced to adapt. So if you don't have straps, you have no option or anything else. You have to get stronger because otherwise you're not going to be able to lift. So you're kind of your
right,
forearm strength and grip strength has to kind of adapt there.
right,
I was listening to and see. I never want to like. That's why I always give credit when I say these things. Like I was listening to X podcast or I saw it on, X person's social media post, because a lot of things that I say, I don't want to say are regurgitated, but like I learned from someone else or not trying to reinvent the wheel. I was listening to a podcast on Elite FTS, which is a powerlifting branding company, I guess is how I would kind of identify them as. It's a powerlifting gym out towards Columbus. I don't want to misspeak. I believe it's in London. And like Jim Wendler, who does the 531 powerlifting program, former West Side guy, he works there. And the place was developed by Dave Tate. Like they sell gym equipment. Um, it's a lot of like media. I mean, it's just like a powerlifting dojo, so to speak. It's like essentially the modern version of West Side. And Dave Tate, the owner and founder, does this podcast where he calls Table Talks. And he has like these elite level power lifters in where they discuss different training philosophies and all that. And then it's kind of like our podcast where the conversation just kind of flows naturally without it. It's never really scripted. And he was interviewing J.M. Blakely, who was a world record holder in several lifts. I think mainly the bench press was his strong suit. And J.M. Blakely was talking about, it kind of really resonated with me when I heard this podcast. And what I'll do is you could just look up like J.M. Blakely interview Elite FTS. Or if any of you listening to this want, I can just message me or text me or whatever, for those of you that have my number, and I will send you the link. It's really good to listen to. But he talked about how a lot of times people will set a goal for a year and they'll say like, I want to increase my bench press 50 pounds in a year. And when you think about that, it certainly seems 100% doable, right? Like if I said, Justin,
Right.
you got to increase your bench press 50 pounds in a year. You think, holy cow, I have a year to do that. That won't be a problem. Like, obviously I'll have to work hard, sure. But like, I can do that at 50 pounds. Yeah. And then when JM started to break it down, he said, okay, so if you bench press 50 pounds a year, that's 52, or there's 52 weeks. So it's basically you're looking at a pound a week, right? Every week
Right.
you got to add a pound. Let's say you don't bench press 1 week because, you have that happens to fall on, a holiday or whatever. The gym's not open. So you don't bench press that week. So now the next week, you got to bench press 2 more pounds because you got to make up for it. And what happens if you get sick for 5 weeks and you have to take some time off the gym, or you get hurt for a month? Now you have to make up that 5 weeks that you missed. So that's 5 pounds you have to add. Plus that number keeps growing every single week you train. So every training session, you have to go up in weight. Otherwise, the 50-pound progression is never going to get there. And when you break it down like that, you think, oh, I could add a pound a week. But then how many times have you gone in intervals where you didn't add a pound a week? So like
Right.
naturally, for most of us, the lowest plate value we have are 2.5 pound plates. So you're looking at 5 pounds is the least you can add to a barbell. So let's say we're bench pressing. The least I can add to a barbell in my facility would be a 2.5 pounds per side. So that's 5 pounds. So that gives me 5 weeks. Well, I've definitely gone longer, than 5 weeks without progressing up 5 pounds in a lift before. Now,
Yeah.
usually I'm a little bit more intuitive now, where if I see I'm starting to stall on a particular movement, I'll change it. But it's like when you think about that, it's like, man, that's really easy to not progress at the rate that I should. And JM, not that I'm recommending people do this, nor do people have the ability to do this, but he said what he would do was he would actually, they would have the metal plates, and he would take the 2.5s and he would actually drill holes in the 2.5s until he got them to weigh 1 pound. So he would make sure sometimes that if he couldn't go up a 2.5 on each side, so he couldn't possibly go up 5 pounds because, the weight he was using was truly his max. If he couldn't add a 2.5 to each side, he would drill holes in them and make them 2 pounds, or he would drill holes in them. He said that there were times when he would drill holes in a plate and make it 1 pound, make sure it calibrated to 1 pound. And he would just put that on one side of the bar. Now, I'm sure there's people with severe OCD that are freaking out saying, how could you add more weight to one side of the bar? But when you're benching 600 pounds and you add 1 extra pound to one side, it's not going to matter. It's obviously
Right.
you would never notice. And his thoughts on progression that way kind of like resonated with me, because that's something that I've always been adamant on, is you have to progress, because you're never really like, there's no such thing as maintaining. You're either getting better, or your body's getting worse. It's one of those two things.
Right.
You're never in like a state of like homeostasis where everything's good and equilibrium and my body's just staying the same. If you're not
Yeah.
building muscle tissue, you're burning muscle tissue. If you're not gaining weight, you're losing weight for the most part.
Right. Absolutely.
So I thought
That's
that was
it.
kind of an interesting because it just aligned with what I always believe is like, you can go up by a rep. You can do an extra 5 seconds. You can do, an extra pull up or what have you, depending on what your goals are.
And I think that's where the like the hooting and hollering in the gym for me comes. When I
Yeah.
get to when I get to that point where I'm taxed, but I know the last week I hit the close grip bench for 135 for 25 reps when we were burning out. There's no way I'm not gonna get 26.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't care. I'm either it's 25 or 26 or bust. You're gonna pick it up off of me, or I'm gonna rack it after 26.
And there's definitely some caveats that come with that, where, like, for me, for example, if I'm aiming for one extra rep, it's so hard, especially when your strength is pretty well maximized. It's really difficult to fight for that extra rep while maintaining the integrity of the lift. So let's say I'm doing bicep curls, especially something that's easy to quote cheat on because you can swing and, throw your back into it and lift the weights up. It's very, very difficult to be so mentally disciplined where you're going to squeeze out that last rep, but you're doing it with the same form as you did the first rep with. So that's something that you
Right.
should always strive for, is your first rep and your last rep of any given movement should look the exact same. The only thing that should change probably is going to be the rep speed. For example, let's just use the bench press example because we've been sticking with it. If I'm benching, for a set of 8 and I got like my 8 rep max where I failed on my 9th rep, well, then the next week I want to get that 9th rep. So my first rep is going to look pretty smooth because my body isn't taxed and the weight should come up fairly quickly, even though it's obviously under control. Then my 9th rep, I'm not going to have much left in the tank. And that's where you get those grinder reps where you're just struggling, and it's inching very slowly. And that's where people have to be careful, again, on a movement like a bench press, that you don't like throw your hips up off the bench or try to kick your feet out from under you, or where your body subconsciously kind of moves onto one side where you kind of shift your shoulders over because your right side's stronger than your left. And it looks like you're rowing a kayak when you're trying to get the bar up. So you have to be disciplined enough mentally and internally to be able to make your last rep look like your first rep, because when you're going for those extra numbers, you have a tendency, not you personally, just you as in, the general pronoun for everybody.
Humans.
You have a tendency to get really, really sloppy with your technique when you have a number in mind versus executing the movement. And that's something that I've had to be very, very cognizant of, because, I keep a logbook with all my training, and my training stays the exact same for long periods of time because I make sure that I progress through these movements. And I have to make sure that, yes, I want to beat my reps or my weight last week, but I have to make sure that the quality of reps was the exact same, if not better than the week previously.
Yeah. It's kind of ironic the amount of things that I do that I learn from you, and I'm not like you're not quote unquote writing my workout anymore.
Yeah.
But I carry a logbook, and anybody who comes to the gym with me, because there's usually somebody that wants to come lift with me somewhere. Which is another thing that's strange to me because I don't feel like I'm anything special. But so I carry a logbook, but the one thing I don't do is I don't plan anything. Like I take my pre-workout, and while I'm letting it kick in, that's when I write my workout out. And I know it's going to be a chest focus today, so I have in my head what I want to do, but until I write it down, I don't know what I'm going to do. But looking back through my logbook, everything is very, very similar. Very similar movements, and the supersets that I do are stuff that I learned from you over the last year, and everything's kind of similar, but I don't. It's not like a written down workout that I follow strictly.
Yeah.
So the repetition and building a habit takes over in that too. Like, even when you want to be spontaneous, your habit takes back over.
And I think that too, there's something to be said with being intelligent enough to be able to structure your training in a way that's going to benefit you and avoid ways that make you comfortable. So like, I know
Hmm.
people that will say, oh, I like doing these exercises all the time because they work for me. And sometimes those same people actually just do those exercises because they enjoy them, which is fine, but there may be better options for you. Maybe it's better to explain if I give examples from the opposite end of the spectrum that people don't want to do, like squats. I'll have people say, oh, I don't like doing squats they just really hurt. Well, that's where you kind of have to assess, okay, is this hurting you because of like a spinal issue or like an orthopedic issue? Or do you mean they hurt because you have heavy weight loaded on your back and you don't want to do them and they just suck? Because I think that you have to be able to discern between this is not fun because it hurts and the movement's bad for me, from a movement or anatomical standpoint, versus this movement hurts because it's just really, really brutal and thus I should be doing it.
Right.
That just comes with experience, I think. Like by now you've been
Yeah.
doing this long enough where you probably know exactly what lifts you like, exactly what lifts you don't like, and exactly what lifts you don't like, but you know you need to be doing.
Exactly. Yeah. Like the squat. I
Yeah.
don't squat nearly enough because I hate it. But I try to do some form of a squat movement every twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I tend to during this quarantine especially I've been relying a lot on Romanian deadlifts. Um for that movement, in particular, or trap bar deadlifts where it's kind of a squat, kind of a deadlift,
Yeah.
all at the same time. Just because I don't want to get buried under 225 or 300 pounds by myself.
Yeah.
So, but in the gym, I mean, I program them in. When I'm at the gym, I have a proper squat rack. I'm programming in squats because I know I have to do them, unfortunately.
My thing with squats, actually, funny you said that. My thing with squats is kind of a love hate too. Like I absolutely love squats. It's certainly my favorite lift. The thing that I hate doing is I hate doing like moderate, medium reps of squats. Like high rep squats are terrible, obviously,
Ugh,
but generally the weights you're working with are light enough to where it's not like completely crushing your nervous system and you don't like enter like severe fatigue when you're done. And I also like heavy squats because yeah, they just feel absolutely brutal on your body, but doubles, singles, triples, 1, 2, 3, 4 reps and you're done. The ones that are the worst are like the 12 to 15 reps for me, where it's going to burn and absolutely going to be taxing on me like cardiovascularly, like because my endurance is not very good. So I'd be breathing like I'm dying. And then on top of that, if you're trying to, optimize and maximize those 12 to 15 reps, you have to be using heavy weight. So that medium range is like heavy weight for a lot of reps instead of heavy weight for minimal reps or low weight for a lot of reps. It's that medium range that just kills me. And those are the ones I hate. The other exercise that I absolutely hate doing, but I love doing for its benefits, are pull-ups. I hate pull-ups. I hate them. I don't know why. And it was a lift that actually growing up and, early on in my training, and even now I'm not terrible at them, but like I was actually pretty good at them. But I don't know. There's something about doing pull-ups that just is so brutal to me. And I hate them. But again, I recognize that it's not an issue with my body. It's an issue with my mind. Like I need to be doing them and they are beneficial for me. And when I do a lot of pull-ups, my back does get better. So got to stick them in.
right. I'm the exact opposite. I cannot wait until I can do program pull-ups into my workout, like actual not assisted pull-ups.
Well,
Like
I guess
I
the grass is always greener then.
but it's a product of my environment, it's part of this journey is I've been checking things off a list of stuff that I've never been able to do, always wanted to try,
Yep.
a bucket list, so to speak. And that's one of them, and it's almost there. I can almost check that box, but until I can sit and rep out 5 or 6 pull-ups, I can't check the box.
Yep. Well,
Uh,
man, I don't
speaking
know.
of,
Do you have go ahead.
I was say, speaking of one, that list. I know we're getting close here on time. Um, if we're gonna try to stick to our theme of 45 minutes when it's just me and you. But I have like I said, I have that bucket list, and 75 hard has done something for me. It's already to this point on day 11. I checked off a pretty big milestone bucket list item that I've always wanted to do and I never could. I never had the drive or the thought that I could do it. You know what I mean? Like my body probably could have done it last year, like this time last year.
Yep.
but my brain wasn't wrapped around it yet. So yesterday after work, I texted my buddy and said, "Hey, you want to go for a hike?" And he's like, "Sure." So I knew I needed to get a workout in because I planned on lifting late last night. So I was like, "This is perfect. We'll go and we'll go hike the Lower Vonda Green Trail at the state park." And it's a pretty legit trail. And the creek was up, so the first half mile of this trail is right along the creek bed. So we were actually mountain climbing, I guess, really, because we were walking along the edge of the cliff, because the creek was up over the trail the whole way
Mhm.
down the first like quarter mile. Anyway, so we get out there and he's like, "How far are we gonna go?" And I was like, "I've always wanted to, like, I know this trail runs from one state park to another." I was like, "I always wanted to go from park to park," and I know that it's how far it is away, and it's not that far. And you think we're following the water, so it can't be too bad. He's like, "Well, let's do it." Um, so we're going and going and going, and then we come to the farthest spot that I've ever been,
Yeah.
and I was like, "This is the farthest I've ever went." So this is uncharted territory at this point. And he's like, "Well, I mean, we can go back or whatever." I'm like, "No, I feel good. Let's go. Let's keep going." So we end up going all the way from one park to the next, and it was 4.2 miles. So I've been running 5Ks, for I don't know, almost over a year now.
Yep.
But a 5K is 3 miles, and that's pretty much my limit. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like I've done three. I can do 3 miles pretty consistently every day if you want me to. But I get pretty pittered out. You know what I mean? My endurance is not much more than that right now. So when I looked at my watch when we got to the other park, I was like, "Dude, this was 4.2 miles. That's the longest I've ever went in one consecutive trip." And the middle portion of that was like, I think it was like 500 feet of elevation gain that we had. It was pretty legit. Like the hill that we had to go up to get to the top before you started coming down to the other park I was like, "Holy crap. I've never like even thought about walking up a hill like that." But
Yeah.
we were there, so we had to keep going. But no, it's just the drive to do something harder every day has been incredible for me when it comes to 75 hard. Um,
Most definitely.
I've been trying to like really pick workouts that are not easy. Um, and I feel like that might be a theme that people that try to do this program do it wrong, in my opinion. Um, because it is just two workouts. He's not real specific.
Mhm.
You don't have to do the kettlebell thing with 150-pound kettlebells for 45 minutes. You know what I mean? Like I
Yep.
seen Sean Baker do that on YouTube today, and I was like thoroughly impressed. But no, you don't have to do these terrible workouts. Like he's pretty clear you don't have to. But in my head, like if I'm doing something that's titled 75 hard, this needs to be hard in all
Yeah, the
aspects.
title isn't 75 leisurely.
Right. It's not I'm gonna go for a walk. Granted, there is a day, and I'm documenting everything in a notebook. So we'll be able to review it at the end and see what all I did. There is a day, I think day 7. On day 6, I went on a hike on the Lower Vonda Green Trail, and at the 3/4 mile mark, I it clicked in my head. Cameron Haynes, I watch a lot of his videos. He carries this rock up and down this hill. When he runs. And he doesn't do it every day. He just does it once in a while. And it's a pretty heavy rock. While I was walking, I seen a rock and I was like, taking that home. Check. So I grabbed that rock, I threw it on my shoulder, and I headed back for my truck. I got about halfway back. So, and then I dropped it and I went back to the truck. So I was telling my wife about it. She's like, "Well, now I want the rock." So I went and got that rock on day 6
Hmm.
and in the rain and carried it all the way back to my truck. And it was about a mile away from my truck. I fell and that's why anyways, this is where I'm going. Is I fell at about the half a mile away from my truck.
Yeah.
On my way back to get to my truck to finish the workout, I fell with the rock, and I felt a pretty significant pop in my left hand and my left quadricep, and it didn't enable me from finishing, so I got up and I was fine, but every step I felt a really strong pull. Um, and I contemplated, like, I probably should take a rest day, and see what's going on with this thing. And towards the evening, I was like, you can't give up. You're only 6 days into this thing. There's no way you can stop. Like, so it's like already this thing has given me the ability to push through something that I probably should have rested. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it was pretty significant. It's better now after a lot of stretching. But so I did a deload for the second workout of the day. I just went for a leisurely walk, but it was still hard because I was limping. You know what I mean? So, like, I don't know. I have to go. Like, I have to do this as hard as I possibly can.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, I got on a tyrant there and segued a couple different places, but
Oh, that's good. All good thoughts. And I think that bottom line is, if it's easy, it's probably not worth your time.
that's it. That's it. And that's not just 75 hard. I think that's training in general.
Yep.
If it's too easy, don't. I mean, I don't want to steer somebody away, but don't waste your time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, pick something that's going to challenge you, because that's how we get better in life, is to be challenged.
Yep, certainly. And actually, I think that's a pretty good place to cut it.
Yeah, I
I'm
agree.
not sure where we're at on time. I mean, doing this via Zoom has not afforded us the opportunity to look at the time right in front of us as we do it. You would think that because I say this and mention it every podcast, you think that I would be like forethinking enough to actually like set a timer so I know that we're within the parameters that we're trying to sit in. But I always forget. Then we get to talking, and next thing you know, it's like, hey, I don't know how long this is, but we end up actually usually getting pretty close to where we want to be regardless. So,
Yes.
all right, man. So
It's
I think this
perfect.
went well today. We kind of went on a whole lot of different topics, but we'll be back in the saddle with some guest interviews next week. Again, I'm not sure who's going to be next, but we have several that are in line. So it's all about scheduling at this point. Anything else you'd like to add before we close shop for the evening?
Just keep after it. Don't let this quarantine stuff hold you back. Don't let anything segue your journey. So if you do, stumble, because everybody seems, the main topic I keep seeing is people keep saying they're gaining weight on this quarantine, or this, that, the other thing. If you do, don't give up. Because it's not the end. You know what I mean? Like, it's never the end. Just keep pushing forward, dust yourself off, and get back after it. Like Jocko always says, good. Every step back is a good, has a good for it. So just push forward and make yourself better.
There you go. It's just that
That's
simple.
it.
All right, guys. So with that, we have come to the end of yet another episode of the Chasing Dreams podcast. So for Justin, I am Charlie. We will see you guys next week.